Welcome, everybody, to Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy podcast, the official Society for the Teaching of Marriage and Family Therapy, STMFT in short, podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sofia Georgiadou. I created STMFT in this podcast as an antidote to the isolation I experienced as an early career academic. I also created STMFT in this podcast as a space to allow myself and my colleagues to share resources and bridge the way we do systemic therapy with the way we teach systemic therapy in our classrooms. I am delighted by today's guest for many reasons. Today's episode covers the Handbook of Online Systemic Therapy Supervision and Training, Practice and Research. We're talking about the evolving possibilities and challenges of systemic work in digital spaces. I am in conversation today with the editors of the handbook, Dr. Valeria Pomini and Maria Borcsa, whose volume brings together our contemporary thinking on online systemic therapy and training across a range of clinical and educational contexts. I want to talk a little bit about Maria Borcsa first. She's a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Applied Sciences in Nordhausen, Germany, a licensed psychological psychotherapist in CBT, family therapist, trainer, and supervisor. She's a founding member of the Institute of Social Medicine, Healthcare Research, and Rehabilitation Sciences at University of Applied Sciences in Nordhausen, co-editor of the scientific journals Systeme, Psychotherapy Dialogue, member of the editorial board of the journals Testing, Psychometrics, Methodology, and Applied Psychology, Contemporary Family Therapy, advisory editor of Family Process, associate editor of Encyclopedia of Couple and Family Therapy, and founding editor of the EFTA, a family therapy book series. She has been a board member of the Systemic Society, Systemische Gesellschaft, German Association for Systemic Research, Therapy, Supervision, and Counseling, board member of the European Family Therapy Association, chair of the Chamber of National Family Therapy Organizations of EFTA, and president of EFTA. Her research interests focus on qualitative methods in mental health and on globalized families. In 2019, Dr. Borcsa received an award from the European Family Therapy Association for her excellence in the research field of family therapy and systemic practice. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you very much, Sophia.
I would like to introduce now Dr. Valeria Pomini. She is a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist trained in systemic family and couple psychotherapy at the Milan School of Family Therapy in the 80s. I'm fangirling hard right now. She lives and works in Greece, where she co-founded the Family Therapy Unit in 1988, and of which was scientific coordinator at the First Department of Psychiatry, National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She's also the co-founder and co-director of the 4-year training course in systemic family and couple therapy, a member of EFTA-TIC, established in at the University of Mental Health, Neurosciences, and Medical Precision Research Institute, Costas Stefanis in Athens. She has a wide experience as supervisor in public mental health institutions for the last 30 years. Her research and clinical interests focus on the intersectionality of mental health problems and family relationships, with a special interest in early psychosis, substance abuse, and other severe youth psychological disorders, couple therapy, digital practices in mental health. She's member of the editorial committee of the Journal of Systemic Therapy and Psychotherapy and Journal of Psychosocial Systems. She's founding member, board member, and past president of the Hellenic Systemic Thinking and Family Therapy Association and co-chair of the Psychotherapy Committee of the Hellenic Psychological Association. Welcome, Valeria.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm delighted to be here.
We're thrilled to have you both here today. Thank you so much for joining us. In our conversation today, as I said, we'll explore the Handbook of Online Systemic Therapy, Supervision, and Training. We'll talk about what it means to practice, teach, and supervise systemic therapy in a world where digital technologies are no longer in the periphery, but part of the fabric of clinical life. We'll discuss how online formats have reshaped therapeutic alliance, presence, and relational processes, and how we as educators can prepare our trainees for competent and thoughtful systemic practice in virtual settings. We'll also reflect on the broader questions this work raises about connection, context, and the future of systemic therapy in the digital age. So, without further ado, let's dive into our first question. Your work on this book started the COVID-19 pandemic. I am curious, what were the biggest shifts you observed in systemic practice from this pre-COVID period to the post-COVID period? And what did the research outcomes suggest about those shifts?
Okay, Sophia. So thank you very much for the introduction again. And I would like to start with a definition on digital technology and psychotherapy, because I think it's important that we have an idea of what we are going to speak today. And you will see it's quite a universe. So we used the definition by Hollis et al. From 2018, and they say that digital technologies refer to, I quote, all interventions, tools, and services, including but not limited to remote therapy, diagnostics, treatment support, monitoring, and self-management, and potentially transformative approaches such as virtual reality, avatars, and robots, using information communications technology, that means the internet, personal computers, laptops, tablets, social media, mobile phone applications, and wearable devices, with the intention of benefiting or improving people's mental health, whether used in conjunction with or independently of mental health services. As we have only 1 hour time, more or less, so we will give only some glimpses of the universe, because when we started, Valeria and myself, to deal with this issue, since then, a lot of things, of course, changed. And so that means that while we are talking, things are changing, and we are always behind the developments for the digitalization in general, but especially also in combination of digital technologies and psychotherapy, because all the research takes time. And that means that before the pandemic, as we are both family therapists, Valeria and myself, we focused from the beginning on systemic therapy. And we realized that in the beginning, Valeria will talk a little more in depth about this issue. In the beginning, there was not the, let's say, huge influence of the digitalization on systemic psychotherapists. And they used tools like emailing, so using the internet or digital technology as a kind of tool for staying in contact with clients or patients, but not necessarily using it as a new setting per se. Valeria and I, we discuss often if it's really only a setting, or if we can speak about a third order cybernetics. Cybernetics is already in the world of systemic psychotherapy from the beginning, and especially true now after the digital revolution. So is it only a new setting, or is it something completely different? And we are still in the process of researching on this question. To start with a little bit, and of course, pandemic introduced a huge, was an extreme boost on application of the digital technologies, especially using video conference tools to stay in touch and to continue the therapy. As we all know, after the lockdowns, it was impossible otherwise. So it was a necessity, and people started to experiment with the digital tools, how they could use video conferences, but also other more creative tools, which is also part of our book. So how they could implement what they used in the rest of their lives, this became new after the pandemic. So let's introduce another wording. Before, it was much more the asynchronous way of communicating, so staying in touch, let's say, by email but then it became really a synchronous tool. And I think this is the biggest change before and after the pandemic.
Wonderful. Valeria, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, I just to highlight something that we are still concerned about, the lack of agreement after so many years so online therapy has been defined in many different ways. So you find in the literature e-therapy, cyber therapy, online therapy, digital supported therapy, multitude of terms. With Maria, we decided to focus, because we are systemic, to focus on the activity of couple and family therapy online, digitally supported, as CFT. This is our missions. I mean, couple and family therapy. But you find a lot of terms which refers to the same activity.
When you say ECFT, are you referring to the synchronous version? I was talking earlier, the synchronous version. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Video conference supported. Yes.
Video conference supported. Yeah. Handbook is positioned for family therapists across Europe and beyond. I'm curious what patterns you have noticed in how couple and family therapists use systemic therapy across different European contexts, and what do you most want readers outside of European context to understand about differences or variations, perhaps?
Yeah, it is known that there are big differences among European Union countries, like languages, first of all, cultures, national legislation on the activity of psychotherapy. Some countries have a legislation about how to do and who is going to do and who is going to be educated in psychotherapy. Some other countries, they don't have still a legislation regulating the activity of psychotherapy. And you can imagine also about online therapy, lack of legislation and lack of similarities in the EU countries, despite the EU community provides a general framework about the use of ICTs, not only in therapy, but generally speaking, which is the GDPR, regulating what is possible to do about data, confidentiality, and so on. So we have many differences, but also some common elements in European countries about welfare system, about the health system, and the organization of the provision of care. So there is a national healthcare system which is functioning in most countries at the public level. So this is a common element in EU countries. Speaking about differences, we have also geographical territories. There are areas, for example, in Greece, we have a population which is in islands, which are very far from the continent, or other areas in the mountain where the availability of mental health services is very poor, or there is a lack of availability. As this happens in other European countries. So these big differences found an advantage in the use of digital supported therapies for people with mental health needs. So people and populations in so remote areas found a way to be reached by professionals which otherwise would be not possible. So through the online activity for health support, not only mental health, but also health support, these populations have a provision of services which otherwise it was not possible. Digital tools and digital health and mental health created a new opportunity to support people in areas where otherwise they had no choice. So we have also some evidence from two surveys we carried in two different times. Before the pandemic, it was in 2017, about the use of digital tools among systemic therapists in Europe and a little bit beyond also in Europe. And then the same survey we repeated during the pandemic. So we were able to compare the results of how much systemic therapists are familiar with the use of digital tools offering psychotherapy and how many therapists were already used to assess the difference between two periods. And of course, we found many differences in between the two time points because, of course, the number of people using ICTs or therapists using ICTs increased at least 30% during the COVID. The concern of therapists who were using ICTs in their clinical work were less important. They were more positive towards using these tools. And also they found that it was really very useful tools in order to give the continuity of care, in order to assess the differences between the 3 points, and specifically to see from the much use of ICTs during the pandemic, how many therapists now are continuing to use them and in which ways. Of course, it is relevant the age of the therapist, and in fact, in the second survey, we had more people, young ages, younger colleagues responding to the survey, and we are also planning to add some questions about the use of artificial intelligence in psychotherapy, which is a totally new tool. So now we are very curious about knowing how AI has been implemented and has been used in our psychotherapy activities.
Amazing. Was this a European Union-wide survey? Was this in Greece or Italy or?
No, it was responding people from most European countries.
Most European countries, wow. Okay.
Yes, more representatives from France, Greece, Italy, second survey also Switzerland, and yes, Spain, Germany. We had also some from abroad, from outside the European countries, but few of them. So we focused on EU countries, yes.
Okay, wonderful. 3 colleagues of mine and I are currently recruiting participants for a survey on attitudes about AI use in clinical practice for MFTs, specifically for marriage and family therapists in the United States. So this is very exciting for me to hear something similar happening in terms of research in the European space. I think it's very important to identify, okay, what are the concerns? What are the barriers? What are the benefits? How are people using these tools in their clinical practice, especially in systemic practice? I am wondering, you spoke a lot, Valeria, about the public health system in Europe, social services, public service agencies, and where MFTs, couple and family therapists, are doing a lot of the work. I'm wondering if you want to share with the audience any of these contexts represented in the book. So do you have maybe some chapters you want to bring forward that are dealing with very specific populations in rural settings or in social services space?
Yes, there is one of the chapters is from UK, and it's about a team working in public health services for children and adolescents, and they are describing their experience in offering online support and specifically systemic online therapy to families with children and adolescents during the pandemic. This is one of the examples. Another example from Milan, in Demi public service, very much focused on adolescents, and they work with families, adolescents. So they focused in their chapter in the use of creative tools, which are possible to be used in presence, but also online, facilitating very much the participation of youth, because they are very creative and playful. It is evident how much in online context, in the setting, online setting of therapy, you can have also tools which are supporting therapeutic work in a way which is very creative and also familiar with young people.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges I've heard systemic colleagues have in telehealth, in ECFT, is the capturing the attention of the younger client and sustaining that attention for a period of time for the session. And then also managing the multiple people on screen conundrum of having families in separate screens if they're not in the same space, or having them together but not capturing all the nonverbals and all the communication that is happening outside of the little square on our screen. There's a chapter which I thought was very interesting on multi-family group therapy online. I was wondering if you wanted to speak more about this, give people a preview, maybe.
This is also an example of systemic online therapy embedded in a public service. It is an experience which is running here in Athens since almost 10 years. So during the pandemic, all of this therapeutic work had to be transported and translated in an online mode. And the modality and people were responding very quickly and in a proper way to this shift to the online modality. And it worked well. So this is even more challenging. It is a multi-person setting with at least two therapists, sometimes three therapists, because we have also therapists who are in training, and we might have 4 or 5 families, and they're not only connected by the same device, but maybe they have different devices. It is very often the young people are connected by on their phone or laptop from their room, while the parents are in the living room connected from some other device. So this is a very multi-person setting. Of course, challenges to all the participants, not only the therapists, but also the participants. But finally, we understood that it is working and continue to offer this online approach, not only during strictly lockdown COVID period during the pandemic, but even for a couple of years later, because we had some families connecting from a distance, not in Athens, but from somewhere else. And it was too difficult for them to be physically present in the service. So we decided to continue for a while offering this kind of service online. And this is an opportunity which is very interesting. So now, challenge is working with so many people at the same time for 2 hours on the screen with very small windows on your screen. It's interesting, but yes, it is really, we found that was working because there is also, it is all the program is supported by research activity. We assessed the clinical situation and the family dynamics, and we found that for the moment, the results were quite positive.
So exciting to see initiatives and programming like this being successful in the local context. I'm going to move us on because I have so much more to ask you about this wonderful handbook of yours. Maria, I'm wondering if you want to tease out a little bit more what has changed, in your opinion, in the therapeutic relationship in systemic therapy online. What has remained the same? And also what has changed in terms of engagement, power dynamics, family dynamics?
Yes, Sophia. So actually, you already started to discuss it's complex already regarding the diverse digital tools. And so generally speaking, psychotherapy and after the digital revolution created a huge space of new possibilities. But of course, we know that if you work in a multi-person setting, this complexity even increases. Like you just spotted out with the multi-family group. I think this is a very good example how complex the situation might get. And so that means that therapeutic alliance, this is also something we can have a look from completely different angles. Because if you use, for example, let's say the Milan approach about neutrality, so that you should be neutral towards the family members. But if Valeria pointed out, if you have a family where one person is connected from one device, the other, let's say the parents, are connected from a second device, and maybe you have a kind of setting where, so post-pandemic, this is of course possible, that someone is in presence with you in the room, or you work with someone in presence and you connect, you have a kind of hybrid situation. You connect a relative who is living abroad, like I wrote in this chapter or also in the German book about globalized families. So that means that you can connect with family members on from a completely different point of view. So that means that also physical presence and absence, they become a kind of continuum. So what does this mean with regard to neutrality? This is something which has to be discussed and conceptualized, and why we think that it's really a kind of third order cybernetics, what we are dealing with, because we cannot just take traditional concepts from face-to-face situations or settings and transpose them one-to-one to this new. This is sometimes feasible and doable, but often it's not, or at least it gives to think a lot about. So that means that therapeutic alliance, which is a common factor, as we all know, and in all psychotherapy forms, it's clear that it is one of the concepts or phenomena to be researched also with regard to digital psychotherapy or digital and mental health services. Let's put it a little bit broader, because you can use also apps or devices where the people are connected with 24 hours to give feedback to their therapist. And there is evidence that if there is someone, a real person behind, that this works better than only using an app and only using a kind of machine. But already this research was done before AI. So we don't know, maybe it might work also with someone who is responding like a therapist. So what is important is that the person feels that there is a kind of relationship. And this is something very interesting to think about. So this creates a completely new field. If we look at it more traditionally, we could say sitting in front of a screen and having, as you have also systemic individual therapy, this is easier. So you talk with one person, and if you have a so-called telepresence, if you are present, fully present in the moment, and you focus on what is going on the screen, then the so-called therapeutic alliance works quite well. And it seems that it works even better for the clients. If you look at the research, it feels for the therapist, which is also interesting. So the therapists often feel it doesn't work that well, but for the clients, it works quite well. So feel there is a kind of relationship, or that it's a good therapeutic relationship. So that means that if you are doing video therapy or supervision or training, you are doing therapy in a room with a family face to face, you have to be fully present. But I think it's in a different way of being fully present. So you have a physiological reaction sometimes. On the other hand, if you are fully aware of what you are doing and you are focusing on the conversation, then the so-called traditional therapeutic alliance is working quite well, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Is some of this research featured in the handbook that you discussed for the readers?
Yes, it is. Research telepresence is done by colleagues from Israel. I'm just checking, and it's in the book because we have 18 chapters in the book. And yes, it's a fifth chapter. And actually, it's a PhD done by Alon Aviram, the virtual third, conceptualizing online couple therapy using grounded theory. And he wrote also in Family Process about this issue. So this is something I would recommend to read for students. also.
Wonderful. Yeah. So it looks like you structured the book. There was a method to the madness in all of the 18
Mhm.
chapters. So you're addressing therapy, supervision, and then the training piece. Do you want to tease out some of the topics in these levels that you have covered in the book, just to give a little bit of a flavor for listeners?
Regarding therapy, one of the most important key elements is the therapeutic relationship that Maria already mentioned. And from the point of view of the client, the online setting gives more responsibility to the client about the setting, because we sharing our office in presence with the client. We have the professional has fully responsibility of the place, of the room, of the space. While in the line setting, we enter with the permission of the client, of course. Client's habitat, which might be part of his of a house or office or even car. Sometimes during the pandemic, many clients were connecting in order to have some privacy. And I will add something about the privacy in a multi-person online family therapy, because the issue changed a lot. So the client has a kind of control on the setting, or as much as the therapist has. So telepresence is something that totally needed by the therapist, but also by the client. Also, I could argue that the client have more control and might feel less stigma, because in an online setting, you don't need to enter a service, for example, to be seen by the community you belong. So it is in some way less a social stigma when you are doing online therapy. I was thinking about the multi-family, multi-person setting, that you don't have so much in family therapy, the issue of confidentiality and privacy, because if our aim is to see the most of the members of the family living together, so even if, for example, some young people who are reluctant to be part of the process, if they are in the room without not be seen, is not a problem, because we are trying to gain their presence. So it is the issue of confidentiality in multi-person family, online family therapy is less crucial than in other kind of psychotherapies. So in my view, this is an advantage of online therapy. So about the therapy, we try to focus on many key issues like good practices and competencies and technical competencies, which are needed by the professional, of course, but also by clients. This also is interesting because sometimes the young people are those most expert in the use of ICTs in the family. So a young person with the psychological difficulties or distress might become within the family the expert on the use of digital. So change the roles. This is interesting. So in regarding supervision, again, we have the issue of supervisory relationship, which is crucial. And again, here, the factor telepresence is crucial also in the relationship between supervisee and supervisor. And in group supervision also, we have additional challenges due to the function of the group, which of course is different when the group is functioning online and in presence. And you need to gain the attention of all the supervisees engaged in the supervisory activity, much more than it is needed in presence. So there are here also some tools like the application has breakout rooms, for example, in order to work in small groups, or possibility to work on whiteboards, sharing material or notes, and like genograms, drawings that the supervisees might bring to the supervisory activity, or by the family, by a client. So Even today, I was in online supervision with a small group of professionals. All of them are systemic therapists. And it is true that for supervision, the online modality offers to the possibility to link with the supervisors of a specific approach, which might not be available in the geographical area where they are. So there are many advantages, and also saving time. In a big, huge town like Athens, for example, saving time is a crucial point, and the online gives you many possibilities like this. And now about training. I have quite a lot of experience in online training, not only the pandemic, but also in the contemporary time. And what I can say, the most difficult is, in my view, in a hybrid situation. When you are with a group and in the room, specifically, I'm speaking, of course, of systemic training and systemic family and couple therapy. So you have, for example, 2/3 of the group of trainees in the room, and some of them, for various reasons, serious reasons usually, like, for example, having just delivering a baby. So the mother is not possible to come, but she doesn't want to miss the training session. So having some of them in online and most of the others in the room, this is very challenging in my view, in order to coordinate the two modalities. So usually I prefer to be only online for everybody or only in presence for everybody. But what I found in the last times is that here in Greece and in Italy as well, where I teach some institutes of family couple training, they use also very much the hybrid. So it is there is a kind of, let us say, silent agreement that hybrid has become a feasible modality to offer training. And this is the most challenging way, in my view.
I remember teaching what you're describing, and I remember teaching a 3-hour class every week for a semester in high flex mode with some students on Zoom and some students in the classroom. And it was very challenging in terms of coordinating the communication and making sure everyone was engaged and involved in some meaningful
Yes.
way. I am curious how this would affect supervision discussions and processing of cases. Talk to me a little bit more about how the structure of the book perhaps is helpful in a training space.
So yes, book is structured. It's an edited handbook. That means that we have colleagues from all over Europe, let's say, and also from the States who are describing on different levels their work in therapy, and the second part is in supervision, and the final in training. And all chapters are focusing systemic approaches, sometimes also group approaches, and there is even research dealing with apps. So how couples can use apps, maybe in combination with their couples therapy. So it's a wide range of different approaches, let's say systemic approaches, from systemic individual approaches to couple, families, multi-families. So you find a lot of inspiring chapters also with regard to what is your interest. So if you are going to be trained as a systemic therapist, then you should have a look, especially on the first part. If you are starting to become a supervisor, then the second part, of course. And training is something, maybe it's also worth to read for the trainees to see how this might work. So that means about confidentiality, about that sharing phone numbers if, let's say, everything is breaking down on the internet, or what to do in crisis situations, etc. This awareness is needed on both sides, and the handbook is also, from one perspective, we can say you can learn something about how to do it and what is especially important on when you are doing systemic work in a, be it therapy, supervision, or training online or with digital tools. but it's also part of our everyday work. So lots of colleagues started in this experimental phase in the COVID to work with digital tools without training. So, and many of them continue in learning by doing, and yes, and sometimes sharing their experiences with other colleagues, learning from each other. And this book offers also a kind of platform to evaluate, become more aware of what we are doing and how we are doing it. And even if we don't have, as Valeria mentioned, laws for providing psychotherapy, we have guidelines, and we should be aware of them. So this is also raising awareness for the whole issue. I don't know, Valeria, if you would like to add something on that.
Yes, I think that it is a working book. I mean, which kind of issue you are concerned about the provision of teletherapy, online therapy, and with systemic approach. I think that you can run to the chapters and find not exactly answers, but at least reasoning about these concerns. We also provide some sites about guidelines, which have been developed by different institutions like the professional orders in Europe, in UK, Italy, and also in other countries, in the US also. But out of this, I think that the reader really can stay reasoning with some of the findings we reported from research from all over the world, especially in the first chapter Maria and myself wrote, which is a kind of introduction, but also on more specific issues on the other chapters. I think it is a practical book which can give some context, reasoning about our concern working online and working systemically online. So I hope this will be useful to not only trainees, but also to professionals and to teachers as well. And of course, we are aware that the book has been printed 1 year ago, and it has been published more than 6 months ago. Everything is developing so fast in this field that we feel that it is already dated in some way. It would need an update, but some very central issues are still the same.
I would agree with that, actually. I think there's definitely competencies that carry over across all the digital tools as they show up. And best practices, which I think you describe by guidelines. Yeah, best practices are definitely there for good reason. And those transfer also across different digital spaces. I'm wondering if there's anything you wanted to add about ways you would like to showcase this book that you're open to, speaking engagements, anything that you wanted to share about how people can reach out to you if they want to discuss more about this book.
Yes, I think actually, if there are colleagues who have other experiences, yes, just to invite colleagues if they are doing this work and they would like to share their knowledge and or write a chapter for the next edition, let's say, we are happy to be in contact with them. I think it is a learning field. So, and we are also part of this learning field. And of course, it's developing very quickly, but it is normal that the digitalization in the application has been always quicker than the understanding what we are doing there. So, and we should try to manage these tools. So we should be the ones who should be the manager of these tools, and not the tools should manage us. This is my final statement.
Wow, louder for the people in the back. Anything you wanted to add about how others reach out to you if they're interested in discussing
Yes,
more?
of course. Anybody who likes to share their experience, I will be happy to have an exchange of ideas, of reasoning with them. So, of course, or if anybody want to know more about the handbook, they can write to us, of course. And what I would like to add is just the concern from the World Organization of Health, WHO, which at some point, from one hand, the very core team of the WHO were wishing that the digital tools in providing not only mental health support, but health in general, would be expanded in the world, reaching in a more easy way the population and regions, remote regions, in order to expand the provision of health and mental health services. On the other hand, and I really agree with this concern, they were, to say, putting the focus on the fact that the digital tools have the danger to provide support instead of the support we can offer in presence. And this is the really challenge of this moment, because it is much more cost-saving to implement digital support to health and mental health, but on the other side, is this instead of the presence in support, I think that the quality of the service delivered will be, say, worse. I mean, it's important not to translate everything in online platform.
Yeah.
And so this is my wish, not to go in this direction.
Yeah. Everything in moderation. I want to say a very big thank you to both of you for sharing your insights and your expertise and this wonderful handbook with us today. To our listeners, I hope you found today's conversation both enlightening and inspiring. If you're hungry for more conversations about teaching systemic therapy, be sure to follow our Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy podcast episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, YouTube, and wherever you find your favorite podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, this is Dr. Sofia Georgiadou signing off for Learning and Teaching Systemic Therapy.